Before anything else, I was a man focused on work. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other and followed a simple path: school, a brief stint in college, and then work. My job wasn't glamorous, but I liked the responsibility. I worked hard, saved money, and lived a quiet life. Relationships and love weren't priorities for me. I figured it would happen eventually. Then I met Laura. She was unlike anyone I'd known, with a determination that went beyond daily life. We met through work, and casual lunches soon became more serious. Laura was ambitious, and that ambition drew me in, though I didn't realize how all-consuming it would be. I was born Leslie, a name I never felt connected to, so at 18, I legally changed it to Jacob Wagner. For 7 years, I had lived as Jacob, growing comfortable in my new identity. Life shifted when I met Laura Elizabeth Keyes during a work training session. She had an almost royal presence, and I was immediately captivated when she introduced herself. Other guys were drawn to her too, but I was the boldest, asking her out first. She politely declined, as she did with everyone else, but it only made me more determined. On the last day of training, she gave us her business card, saying we could reach out with any questions. I waited until Monday to call her, leaving a message. "What problem do I need to come up with to get you to go on a date with me?" She called back the next day, and after some playful banter, we arranged to meet in the evening instead of lunch. That's how it all began. We had dinner together every night for the rest of the week and continued this routine for 5 more weeks. We never had lunch because she trained daily from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. She was either running, swimming, or cycling, preparing for the Ironman competition. The Ironman involved a 2.4-mile swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and a full marathon of 26.2 miles, all completed within 17 hours. Laura was vegan, so our meals were mostly quinoa, kale, tofu, and other plant-based foods. It took me a while to adjust to her diet. We first made love at her house, which was more of a gym than a home, with rubber balls and weight benches as seating. Her bed was hard, but our physical connection was incredible, and it only got better over time. We had closeness whenever we could. 14 months after we met, we got married. She stopped training during our honeymoon, but resumed immediately after. One evening, she mentioned wanting to compete in the Ironman in Wisconsin, her first at that level, and said she'd need to train even harder. I couldn't imagine her training more than she already was, but she was confident. I was hesitant, as her training was already intense, and preparing for an Ironman would double the time. Soon, our expenses started increasing. About 4 months into her intensified training, she said she needed a coach. Her gym had a trainer with Ironman experience, but he was expensive. The first thing he did was convince her to quit her job and focus on training full-time, which she did without consulting me. Losing her income strained our budget. She had a good bike, but her coach insisted on more, one for competition, one for training, and even a spare. She ended up with 4 bikes costing as much as my truck. Time passed, and I decided it was time to meet Laura's trainer. I went to the gym, knowing his name was Jason Hendricks since I'd been writing him checks every week. I saw him standing over Laura as she lifted weights. After watching them for a bit, they moved on to another exercise involving pulling weighted ropes from the wall. Laura had her back to the wall, holding the ropes, and Hendricks stood very close, facing her. I watched as he ran his hands along her arms, then cupped her chest while talking to her. "Why are you touching my wife's bosom?" I asked, startling them both. "Jacob, what are you doing here?" Laura asked. "I thought it was time to meet Mr. Hendricks," I replied. He offered a handshake, but I ignored it. "You have no right to touch her like that," I said. "I can't train her properly without it," he responded. "You need to touch her bosom to train her? What kind of training is this?" "It's part of my method." "Then we'll find someone else. You're fired," I said. "Laura, I'll see you at home." I walked out, and she followed me shortly after, furious. "You can't fire him for doing his job," she argued. "He was playing with your bosom and you let him. He was assessing my muscle mass." "That's ridiculous," I said, laughing. "He was just playing with your bosom and you stood there smiling." "He's not fired. I need him," she insisted. "Then you can keep him, but I won't pay for it or any of your training." She glared at me. "I'll get a job, but he stays." I paused before asking, "How important is he to you?" "Very important," she answered. "And me? Where do I rank on your list of priorities?" She didn't answer directly, but her silence and defiant stance were enough. I realized where I stood. I sat for several minutes confused. It was clear she had made her choice, which made mine easier. I went to my computer and started researching how to handle family issues. I decided to act before she did. I wasn't going to let that guy get another cent of my money. If she wanted to pay him, she could do it with her own funds. Before we got married, I had a fifth-wheel trailer I used during college summers. Laura and I had taken it to the mountains for her training, as she preferred biking and running on slopes. I went upstairs and she was in the bathroom talking to someone. I only caught, "See you tomorrow." I gathered some clothes and moved them to the trailer. On my second trip, I heard the bathtub running, knowing she'd be there for at least an hour. After several trips, I packed my computer and other personal items and spent the night in the office parking lot. The next day, I told my boss about the situation. When he asked my plans, I admitted I didn't have any yet. That evening, I returned home to pick up more things. Laura was eating a kale salad. As I gathered files in our office, she asked, "Where did you go last night?" "I stayed at the plant," I said. "Did you bring Hendricks over to evaluate you again?" "No, it wasn't necessary," she replied. "Would it have been true?" I asked. "No." After a pause, she asked, "What are you doing?" "I'm leaving," I said. "Why?" "Because you made it clear yesterday that he's more important than me. I need him to do well in Wisconsin. No other coach can help me like he does. I saw how well you two work. He touches you, and you smile." "He didn't fondle me." I shook my head. "We were a good team once. We could be again. Just give me a chance." "Will you give him up as a coach?" She shook her head. "Then I'm leaving." I packed my things and headed to the door. "When will you be back?" "That's up to you. Tell me he's done, and I'll stay. If not, I'm leaving for good." Without hesitation, she said, "He's staying." One of us was being selfish, or maybe both. I wanted a wife. She wanted to compete. It took me 3 trips to load the rest of my things into my truck, and she watched each time. On my last trip, she asked, "Where are you going?" "I don't know." "When will you be back?" "We've already discussed this. I'm not coming back." "Jacob, you can't do this just because of my coach. And you can't choose a coach over me." "But it seems like you are." I took half of our money, canceled her credit cards, and turned off her phone. I reminded her that bills were due and advised her to get a job soon or face financial trouble. I grabbed her competition and spare bikes from the garage, threw them into my truck, and she ran up, protesting. "You can't take them." "I paid for them," I replied, and drove off. She didn't seem to care I was leaving, but losing the bikes upset her. The next morning, I drove by the gym and saw her crying while Hendricks held her hands. I didn't know if it was because our marriage was over or because I took her bikes. I took the next day off to find a place for my trailer and got settled. Later, I told my parents everything. My mom asked if I was okay, and my dad asked if I needed money. I said yes to the first and no to the second. Laura and I didn't speak for 2 weeks until she called. She left a message, so I called back. "Where do we go from here?" she asked. "Are you still training with Hendricks?" "Yes, I need him." "Then we're getting a divorce." "You can't be serious." "Have you slept with him?" "How could you ask that?" "Simple question. Have you?" She hung up. The next day, my boss offered me a position in Leadville, Colorado, and I left for Colorado the following day. 2 months passed, and fall arrived in Colorado with winter approaching. A small trailer wasn't ideal for winter, so I rented an apartment and bought cheap second-hand furniture. After living in a trailer, the extra space felt odd. My family invited me home for Thanksgiving, and I agreed. By then, I had returned to my regular diet. No more quinoa, kale, or tofu. Thanksgiving with my family was enjoyable, and no one missed Laura. The day after, I headed back to Leadville. While filling up my truck, I ran into an old friend, Zeke. We caught up, and he told me he had seen Laura with a muscular guy, likely Hendricks. Over coffee, Zeke mentioned seeing them holding hands and kissing in public. While we talked, Zeke's brother called. During the call, Zeke learned that Laura and Hendricks were staying at the EMS Motel. He suggested we check it out before I left town. We drove to the motel, and I parked in a distant corner. Zeke's brother, who worked there, assured us there were no working cameras, so we didn't need to worry about being seen. He also mentioned that Laura and Hendricks had been staying there because Hendricks was married and couldn't take her to his house. They usually stayed once a week, and since his wife was away for Thanksgiving, they had been there for 2 days. Zeke asked his brother for the key to their room, assuring him we'd return it quickly. M handed over the key without hesitation. The motel still used regular keys instead of electronic ones. Zeke and I went to their room, and it was clear someone had recently had closeness there. "Okay, Jacob, it's up to you now. I'll take pictures from outside, and you take them inside," Zeke said. "Are you sure M won't get in trouble?" I asked. "He owns the place. He's fine. Just do your part, and I'll do mine." The room was on the 2nd floor, overlooking a construction site. The balcony door was broken and couldn't lock. I went downstairs to ask M for a ladder, and he directed me to a shed. I grabbed a ladder, tested it, and then returned to my truck to wait. About half an hour later, Zeke called to say they were back. It was already dark, and I watched for the room's light to come on. When they didn't bother closing the curtains, I quietly walked up the stairs and started taking photos as they undressed after the gym. When they looked toward the balcony, I ducked out of sight. Laura never had closeness without a shower, so they headed to the bathroom. With the door open but the shower built into the wall, they couldn't see what was happening outside. I got to work, packing all their clothes into 2 travel suitcases. I grabbed everything hanging on the clothes rack by the bathroom, tossing it all over the balcony. I checked the bathroom for any forgotten items, even crawling in to take all the towels, washcloths, and the bath mat. I could hear them talking in the shower, but couldn't make out the words. I knew they couldn't see me because of the shower curtain. I threw everything, including the bed linens, off the balcony and went downstairs to load it all into my truck. The people in the room below watched me, but when I put my finger to my lips and mimed locking my mouth, they nodded in agreement, signaling they'd keep quiet. They were likely cheating too, so they had no reason to say anything. I met Zeke and Em at the front desk, giving Em the bed linens. The brothers laughed as Em started printing photos Zeke had taken. Time was short, even if Laura and Hendrix took a quick shower. Em had just begun printing my photos when the front desk phone rang. He winked at us when he saw the caller ID. "Reception desk," Em answered. After a pause, he said, "Are you saying the ladder is still there? I'll send extra towels and bedding, but I can't help with your clothes. I'll call the police." Pause. "No police? Okay, but all I can offer is towels." Pause. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." He hung up, and we burst into laughter. I asked if I could deliver the towels myself, which made them laugh even harder. Em handed me a fresh pack of towels and sheets. I went upstairs, knocked on their door, and called, "Room service." Hendrix cracked the door open. "I'll take them," he said, but I pushed past him. Laura stood there, dripping wet and trying to cover herself. They didn't recognize me until I tossed the towels to Laura. She screamed and grabbed a sheet. "I saw everything, Laura. No need to hide. Maybe your trainer should pay more attention to your pecs," I said, laughing. Hendrix stood without clothes in the middle of the room, looking confused. His upper body was impressive, but the rest wasn't, and I laughed harder. "Don't bother, Laura. I'll be in town long enough to file for divorce. Good luck in Wisconsin." "Jacob, please," she began, but I walked out. I left the door open as I walked out, and Hendrix didn't move the entire time. Laura tried calling me, leaving messages from both her phone and the motels. In her messages, she said I had abandoned her and that she needed Hendrix, first for training, then for emotional support. I stayed in town for 2 days to start the divorce process. While going through the clothes I took from their room, I found Hendrix's wallet, keys, phone, and a small black notebook with names, addresses, phone numbers, and ratings of sexual partners. Laura was rated 6 out of 10. Em later told me that someone had brought them clothes after I left, and they checked out the next morning wearing ill-fitting tracksuits. The man had brought a spare key to Hendrix's car. Before heading back to Leadville, I stopped by Hendrix's house and gave his wife his clothes, personal items, and copies of the photos Zeke and I had taken. Zeke's of them entering the motel holding hands, mine of them undressing. None were explicit, but it was clear what was happening. She was particularly interested in the black book. I also handed her Laura's things and suggested she call Laura to pick them up, laughing as I left. A couple of hours later, as I drove back to Leadville, Laura called. "Jacob, you left me. Let's talk and bring my bikes when you come." She clearly missed her bikes, but I had already sold them. "Screw you," I replied, and hung up. Later, my boss was hosting a Christmas party for everyone at the plant. I volunteered to bartend since I knew the difference between gin and bourbon. The party was in full swing, and I only took one break to use the restroom. I was enjoying myself like the other guests. One woman brought me a plate of food and told me to take a break. She sat at the bar with me while the rest of the guests, about 40 people, mingled around the large basement. Some sat by the fireplace laughing while others danced. We were the only ones not joining in, me eating and her watching. "My name's Diane Webster," she said. "I've been watching you, and you don't seem bothered about missing the main part of the party." I dried my hands and shook her hand. "Jacob Wagner, and I'm probably having more fun here. You'd be surprised what people tell their bartender." She laughed. "I hear you work at the plant." "Yeah, and you?" "I'm an accountant and a neighbor, so I get invited to these parties." "Do they have parties often?" 3 or 4 times a year. They're usually fun and sometimes wild." "Is this one like that?" "No, Christmas is tamer. The 4th of July parties are big, though." I haven't worked with Jonathan long, but he seems like a great guy. "Oh, he and Amber are wonderful." I hadn't finished my food when a guest asked for drinks, and Diane helped serve him. "Thanks," I said. "You've done this before?" She laughed. "I've opened a few bottles. Jonathan and Amber Whitmore, our hosts, were great people. Jonathan had deep knowledge of the plant, the mine, the quarry, and transportation. I was lucky he took me under his wing, and I enjoyed working as his assistant. After I finished eating, another guest offered to take over bartending. "Take a break and dance with this lovely lady," he said, pointing to Diane. I handed him my towel, bowed to Diane, and she curtsied back. We laughed and danced, staying close for 3 songs. Afterward, I told her, "I should mention, I'm married," and she stepped back. "Is she here?" "No, it's complicated, but I can explain quickly." "Go ahead." We grabbed our drinks and went upstairs to the office. She sat on the sofa and invited me to join her. "Okay, tell me about your marriage." I told her the whole story. When I got to the part about stealing their clothes, she burst out laughing. Once she calmed down, she asked, "So, when's the divorce?" "I filed after Thanksgiving, so it'll take a few months." "What's your story?" I asked. "Same as yours, except my husband didn't need a coach for his athletic accomplishments. He practiced regularly with waitresses at local bars. I never caught him, but in a small town, word gets around. That was a little over a year ago." "How do you feel about life after the divorce?" I asked. "It's still new. We divorced 5 months ago, but the problem is that many people think being divorced means I'm available." I laughed, but I realized she wasn't someone I wanted to get involved with. We talked until Amber Whitmore told us it was time to leave. I walked Diane to her house next door, and we said goodbye with a handshake. 2 days later, I asked my boss for Diane's phone number. "I can't give it without her permission, but I can give her your number and she can decide." That was fine with me. 3 days later, she called. We talked for a long time and she gave me her number. We spoke often, and our first date was 2 days before Christmas. We had dinner, danced a little, and I walked her home. She was spending Christmas with her family, and I was alone in my apartment. Around 5:30 p.m. on Christmas Day, my doorbell rang. It was Diane. "Would you like some company?" she asked. "I really would," I replied, and she came in with a small basket. She laid out turkey, ham, potatoes, and all the usual Christmas dishes. "I told my parents you were probably alone and hungry, so my mom put this together for you. Thank her for me. It looks fantastic." We ate and talked the entire time, then cleaned up together. Later, we sat on my couch with eggnog, still talking. I found out her ex-husband worked at the best hardware store in town, and I realized I knew him from casual chats at the store. They had been married for 3 years before divorcing. "He seemed like a nice guy," I said. "He is. We're still friends, but he cheats, and I can't tolerate cheaters. Can I ask something personal? Feel free to say it's none of my business." "Go ahead." "Your ex works at a hardware store, and you're an accountant. How do you afford to live near the Whitmores?" She smiled. "Thanks to my grandparents. They owned the land where the area was built. My house was the first one, and was used as the model for the others. When everything was sold, they gave it to me." "Great-grandparents, where do they live?" "They have a small ranch in Texas. They're actually at my parents' house for Christmas, and I just got back." It was past midnight when Diane decided to leave. I walked her to her car and saw about 10 inches of snow had fallen. I wasn't used to such heavy snow and worried about her driving home, but she reassured me, having driven in these conditions all her life. "It's no big deal," she said while we cleared the snow off her car. "The plows don't come out until about 6 inches fall. I'll be fine." She put her hand on my shoulder, pulled me in for a kiss, and said, "Merry Christmas. I'll call you when I get home if you want." "I want you to," I said, kissing her back. It was our second date and our first kiss. Our third date was on New Year's Eve at her parents' party. She introduced me to her family, including her brother, sister, and their spouses. The party was busy, and we didn't get much time together, so I grabbed a drink and socialized. Her grandparents had already returned to Texas, but about 50 people were there, including my boss and his wife. "Well, Jacob," Jonathan Whitmore said, "you must be doing something right to be invited here." "I think so too, Jonathan," I replied, and his wife added, "Call me Amber anytime." I didn't see much of Diane as she was helping her parents, and when I tried to assist, I was told to enjoy the party. I did, thanks to the Whitmores. They introduced me to several important community members. A young lady named Rosita Cameron, or Rosie as she preferred, stuck by me, ensuring I had food and drinks. After an hour, I was ready to escape her clingy attention. I tried to stay near the Whitmores and other guests, but Rosie wouldn't leave me alone. I managed to hide for a bit in the restroom, but she was waiting for me when I came out. Eventually, I told her I was leaving. I looked for Diane, but couldn't find her, so I thanked her mother and said goodbye. Then I grabbed my coat and left. The next morning, as I made breakfast, my phone rang. It was Diane. "Happy New Year," I said. "How was the party?" "It was fine until Mom said you left. I got upset, and the party went downhill. Why did you leave without telling me? The main reason I left is a young lady named Reseda. She clung to me and wouldn't let go. Every time I saw you, you were busy hosting, pouring drinks, or serving snacks. I looked for you before leaving, but Reseda was still holding onto my hand, so I left to escape her. I sensed her mood lift a bit. Oh my God, she's a good friend of mine, and I asked her to make sure no other woman got too close to you. Well, she did her job well. Nobody came near me, but I didn't want her to scare you off. Anyway, Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you too. It would have been better if you'd stayed. I'm making breakfast if you'd like to join. I'd love to, but I'm watching the Rose Parade with my family. We chatted a bit and set up dinner for 3 days later. The day before, I called to confirm she could still come. Sorry, Jacob, something came up, she said without offering to reschedule. That evening, I remembered I needed epoxy to fix a broken lamp, so I stopped by the hardware store. There, I overheard Diane's ex-husband, David Webster, talking to a customer. Yeah, she's coming back to me, just a couple more dates, and we'll be together again. I screwed up the first time, but I've learned. After dinner tomorrow, I'll know where we stand. The customer wished him luck, and then David noticed me. Hey, Jacob, need help? Just some epoxy, the small kind, he laughed. We barely sell the big cans. At checkout, I couldn't resist asking, I heard you talking about dinner, trying to get back with your ex? Not just any ex, my ex-wife. I messed up, and I'm trying to fix it. Tomorrow's my birthday, and she agreed to have dinner with me. She used to give me special birthday gifts, if you know what I mean. He laughed, clearly implying something more. What does she think about getting back together? I asked. Not sure, but we're friendly. Sometimes we have dinner or spend the night together, if you know what I mean. I got the hint and took my epoxy and change, then left. 2 days after their dinner, Diane called me. How are you? She asked. Not bad. And you? Good overall. So, your dinner with David went well? Yes. How did you know about that? Does it matter? He thinks you're getting back together. He mentioned that just a couple more pleasant evenings with you, and it'll all work out. Is that true? A couple more nice nights, and everything will be fine? What do you mean by pleasant evenings? She asked, her tone serious. Dinner, dancing, maybe a roll in bed for his birthday gift. He said you always gave him nice birthday gifts, and he hinted that closeness with you was pretty good. Jacob, that's not true. Oh? How is it not true? Just talking? Yes, just talking. Pillow talk is always nice. There was a long pause, then she said, Goodbye, Jacob. I looked at the phone and quietly said, Goodbye, Diane. The next 2 weeks at work were a lifesaver. Our equipment was down, we were behind in production, and we were short on workers. Overall, it was a tough 2 weeks, but it kept me busy, like a cat burying its poop, and time passed quickly. On the last workday of the month, Jonathan and I, as usual, had lunch together. We ordered, sat down, and drank our coffee. What's going on between you and Diana? He asked. Amber's been in touch with her, and we thought things were going well. Then Amber told me you accused her of sleeping with David. You don't have to share your personal life, but... I took a sip of coffee. Well, here's the story. I explained everything to him. So you didn't directly accuse her, but you implied it, right? Just like Webster hinted to you. The issue is, she didn't deny it. Yeah, I said. He broke her heart once, and he'll do it again. She's a grown woman. She'll handle it, Jonathan replied. I hope so, I said. The rest of lunch was focused on work. Jonathan wanted me to go to Atlanta in a few weeks to convince headquarters to give us 2 more trucks for the quarry. It would be my first trip to HQ, and I was looking forward to getting off that icy mountain for a while. As I drove to the Denver airport for my flight to Atlanta, it had been a month since I'd spoken with Diana, and I had also switched hardware stores. This was only my 4th flight, and I'd heard flying in or out of Denver during the day could be rough. The takeoff proved it, with 10 minutes of turbulence, but things calmed down once we leveled out. In Atlanta, we got the 2 extra trucks, not because of my pleas, but because the numbers made it clear. I think HQ just wanted to make me sweat a bit. Jonathan suggested I visit my parents on the way back, so I did. I missed the warm southern weather, especially in February. It was freezing in Leadville, but in my hometown it was 20 degrees Celsius and sunny. My parents picked me up from the airport, and after hugs and kisses, we caught up on the latest news. We avoided talking about Laura, and my lawyer had only called me once about the divorce. Laura only wanted her 2 bicycles, which I had already sold. I decided to call my lawyer the next day to check in. After dinner, I called my friend Zeke, and we met at one of our favorite spots for drinks. He told me Laura and Hendrix had moved into the old trailer together. Their only income was from his work as a trainer, and she was still doing nothing but training. At least she was getting it for free. They had posted flyers all over town, asking for sponsors to help her get to Wisconsin in April for her Ironman competition. They even went on local TV twice, begging for money. Zeke, Em, and some of my other friends made it clear that Laura was still married to me, had cheated on her husband, and was now living with her coach, Hendricks. Hendricks' wife even went on TV to expose how she retrieved their belongings from the motel, although she didn't mention who helped her. The motel's unintentional publicity boosted business, but Laura's only sponsor remained the gym where she trained. Her donations were minimal, or so I was told, though only Laura and Hendricks knew the real numbers. There was also a rumor she had gotten pregnant, but had a pregnancy termination to avoid disrupting her training. However, it was just a rumor as far as anyone knew. The next day, I called my lawyer, who confirmed most of what I had heard. He mentioned our trial was likely to take place in April and asked if I would attend. "Probably not," I replied. "No worries. I can handle it," he said. The following morning, I flew back to Denver. Some seasoned travelers say morning flights are smoother, and they were right. No turbulence. After landing, I picked up my truck and drove home. The weather was clear and sunny, but when I got to Leadville, it was freezing cold like a witch's chest. It was too late to go to the office, so I headed straight to the best restaurant in town. I planned to have dinner, but as I looked for a seat, I spotted Diana with a man, his back to me. I assumed it was David. We made brief eye contact, and I turned around and left. Back at my apartment, I microwaved a meatloaf dinner and had a beer. As I went to bed, the mountain wind was howling. Wind speeds of 110 miles per hour weren't unusual, scattering snow everywhere. My last thought before sleep was how nice it would be to have someone to cuddle with. The next morning, my apartment was warm, but the frosted windows made it clear how cold it was outside. I hoped to avoid going to the quarry that day. Later, I stopped by Jonathan's office to tell him about my trip, and he congratulated me on securing the 2 trucks. "To be honest, I didn't think we'd get them," he said. "You must have made an impression. Great job." "Thanks," I replied, then headed back to my office to catch up on work. That evening, I returned to the cafe. Diana or not, I wanted a good meal, and their coffee was the best. I ordered and wrapped my hands around my cup to stay warm. "Can I sit down?" I heard a familiar voice ask. Without looking up, I replied, "Are there no other seats?" "There isn't one I'd like," she said. "Fine," I said. "If this place is so special, it's all yours." I grabbed my coffee and coat and moved across the restaurant. When I looked back, I saw Diana leaving. Apparently, it wasn't that special to her after all. After that, the coffee and food didn't taste as good. A few days later, Jonathan called me into his office. "Have a seat, Jacob," he said. I sat down and he started, "I'm in a bit of a tough spot. Next week, the company president, 2 senior vice presidents, and their wives are visiting. They'll stop here before heading to Vail to ski, and I want to throw a party for them. As my assistant, you should be invited. And since Diana is a good friend of my wife, she'll be invited too." Jonathan paused before continuing. "It would be better if both you and Diana came with dates. It would also be nice if Diana brought someone." I knew where this was heading. "Are you following?" he asked. "Yes, sir, I understand. Let me try to help. Invite Diana and she might bring her ex. I've heard they're getting back together if they haven't already. I can head to the quarry and start repairing one of the Cat 789S, which will definitely need work by then. That should solve your problem, right?" Jonathan smiled, shaking his head. "You've impressed me since you started here with how quickly you come up with good, practical solutions. But this is the first time you've made me think you're dumber than a truck full of rocks. The party is at my house next Friday. Wear a suit and tie and bring a date. Now get back to work." Wear a suit and tie and bring a date. He meant it. The suit and tie were easy, but finding a date was the challenge. There were only 10 days until the party, and I hardly knew any women in town. None of them were close enough to ask to a Whitmore party, and I didn't even know who was single or available. Jonathan wasn't the only one in a bind. I was too. Time flew by, and I still didn't have a date. It was Saturday afternoon, and I was in my apartment. I opened the fridge to take out the bag of chili I had defrosted earlier. I love chili and experimenting with different recipes. This last batch had turned out great. I grabbed the chili and a beer, but noticed the fridge light was off and the motor wasn't running. I opened and closed the door a few times. Nothing. I checked the electrical panel, and the fridge breaker was tripped. I reset it, but it tripped again. After a few attempts, I put the beer and chili back in the fridge, threw on my coat, and headed to the hardware store. There were 2 hardware stores in town, and I had avoided the one where David Webster worked. But the other store was closed, which was unusual for a Saturday afternoon. With no choice, I went to Webster's store. I quickly found what I needed and headed to the checkout, hoping to avoid running into Webster. Unfortunately, there he was, talking to a man I recognized as Diana's father. I had met him at a party but didn't interact much. I mainly recognized him by his distinctive curled mustache, which he was proud of. He sang in a barbershop quartet, and all 4 members had similar mustaches. I listened to their conversation. I thought everything was settled, but she stopped talking to me, Webster said. She did the right thing, Diana's father replied. You don't deserve a second chance. You messed up once, and none of us, especially Diana, think you'd act any differently if she gave you another chance. But who's this guy she's dating? No one seems to know him, and no one has seen them together. Is he from Leadville? It's none of your business, David. Just leave her alone. They finished the transaction, and after Diana's father said, just leave her alone, he took his change and left without looking back. Webster saw me and smiled. Long time no see. How are you? Not bad, I replied. It seems like every time I come here, you're talking about your personal life. Do you ever discuss anything else? He laughed. It's a small town. There's not much else to talk about. How's your personal life? Last time we talked, you were trying to win back your ex-wife. Not great. She's met some guy who's completely charmed her, but no one knows who he is or has seen them together. I remembered seeing Diana with a man at the cafe. Maybe he's not from town, I suggested. He has to be, Webster said, shaking his head. I completed my purchase, went home, replaced the circuit breaker, and felt relieved when the fridge started humming again. I heated up the chili, had 2 beers, and stared out at the snow falling, wondering who Diana's new boyfriend might be. We didn't have a long relationship, just a few dates, but I liked her. The next day, Sunday, I was doing laundry. My building only had 4 apartments and no laundry room, so every Sunday I took my clothes to the laundromat on Main Street. It was always empty when I went, and I often wondered how it stayed in business. One perk of going early was finding parking easily, as the street stayed quiet until after church, when people flocked to the restaurant next door. It was still early, and mine was the only truck parked outside. I was reading the news on my phone when the door to the laundromat opened. I looked up and saw Diana. I went back to my phone, but I could hear her footsteps approaching. She sat down on the plastic chair next to me. We stared at each other for a few moments before she spoke. I think we can help each other, she said. How? I asked. Jonathan and Amber are having a party on Friday. We were both invited, and I know they'd like us to bring dates. Why don't we set aside our differences for a few days and go together? I thought for a moment. What about David? Aren't you two getting back together? Won't he be jealous? Honestly, he's not the kind of person you'd take to a party like that, if you know what I mean. I listened, and for a moment I felt sorry for David. What do you mean? David was your husband for 3 years, right? You must have gone everywhere with him. He lived in the house you're in now, and he attended the Whitmore parties with you. If he's not good enough to bring to a party, that's sad. I get that he cheated on you, but he's trying to win you back. Maybe this party is his chance to prove he's changed. She stared at me, her expression unchanged. Are you saying I should go with David? She asked. I'm not sure, but it doesn't seem like you're planning to go with me. Without a word, she stood up and walked out. As I watched her leave, I realized how foolish I'd been. She had reached out to me, and I stubbornly kept pushing her away. That was pretty stupid. I jumped up and followed her. Diana, wait. She was already holding the door handle, about to leave, but she stopped. I caught up to her. Well? She asked. I stammered. Come on, Jacob, speak up. But it better be something worth hearing. I don't know the status of your relationship with David, so if I'm out of line, tell me. But here's what I've been thinking. I took a deep breath. Laura cheated on me. David cheated on you. I'm not interested in getting back with Laura. She's happy with her coach. But David seems eager to get back with you. And after a few dates with you, I can see why. I like you more and more. Then, when we agreed to go on a date, you canceled, saying something came up. I let it go, but I later found out you were seeing your ex-husband. You told me you two were still good friends. I spoke to him, and he mentioned trying to reconcile with you. He even hinted, though never outright said, that you spent some very pleasant evenings together, especially on his birthday. Then yesterday, I overheard your father telling David to stay away because you have a new boyfriend. David didn't seem willing to give up. So now, I'm stuck in the middle, between your ex-husband, this new boyfriend, and the guy I saw you with at the restaurant. You suggested we go to the party together, and I thought maybe we could build something serious. But I don't want to compete, especially when I don't know the rules. With you, it feels like there are no rules, so I don't know what to do. By the time I finished, we were back sitting on the plastic chairs. She took my hands in hers. "Did you really mean it when you said you like me more and more?" she asked. "Yes. And if there was no ex-husband and no guy from out of town, would you go to the party with me?" "With pleasure." "What time will you pick me up, or should I meet you there?" "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "I mean, I have no intention of getting back together with David. The 3 meetings we had after the divorce were strictly about the divorce. He tried to convince me to give up alimony, but I won't. I don't need his money, but he'll keep paying until I remarry, if that ever happens. I canceled our date to make it clear to him that it was over. Nothing sexual has happened between us since the divorce, no matter what he might have implied. Honestly, I didn't even realize our last meeting was on his birthday. As for the out-of-town boyfriend, that's you, or was you, depending on how you want to look at it. Any questions?" she added with a smile. "Only about 3 dozen, I replied. "You can start asking them over dinner tonight. For now, your laundry's dry and ready to fold. Is 6:30 at my house okay?" "That'll be perfect," I said, still feeling a bit dazed. "Great. See you then," she said, standing up. She kissed me, took a couple of steps, then came back and kissed me again. This time it lasted longer. "I really like kissing you," she said as she walked away. I watched her leave, amazed at how quickly things had changed. I also felt surprised by my own foolishness. Why hadn't I talked to her a month ago? Sometimes men can be such fools. That night, dinner wasn't memorable for the food, but everything else was unforgettable and nearly perfect. It would have been ideal if the night ended in wild act, but it didn't. However, it ended with very pleasant kisses. On Thursday, Jonathan asked me if I had a date for the party. I assured him I did. "That's good because I hear Diana has a date too, but I expect you both to behave, okay?" "I think everything will be fine," I said with a smile. Friday night, I parked in her driveway, then walked over to Jonathan and Amber's house. There were 2 limousines and several other cars outside. I rang Diana's doorbell and smiled when she opened it. She invited me in while she grabbed her shawl. She was wearing that little black dress every woman owns, the one that makes them look incredible. "Wow," was all I could say when I saw her. She smiled. When Jonathan opened the door for us, his eyes widened. "Are you 2 together?" At that moment, Diana leaned over and kissed me. Jonathan looked at both of us and said, "I'll take that as a yes," with a smile. I was pleased when Jonathan introduced me as his assistant to the 3 bosses and their wives. The president even mentioned that I'd convinced them to approve 2 new trucks. "Yes, sir," I replied, but did you see the numbers?" After laughing and confirming that he had, we enjoyed a long, pleasant evening. The guests of honor left by midnight, and Diana and I were the last ones there at 2 a.m. Eventually, Amber admitted to Jonathan that she knew Diana and I would show up together, but just wanted to see how nervous he'd get. We all had a good laugh. I walked Diana home, and since it was late, we kissed at her door, but she didn't invite me in. My lawyer called the next day to tell me that my divorce hearing with Laura was set for April 7th. He asked if I planned to attend. Last time, I said probably not. This time, I said yes. My relationship with Diana kept progressing, though we hadn't rushed into anything physical. We were both content getting to know each other better. Then the day of the divorce trial arrived. I sat next to my lawyer in the courtroom. Laura didn't show up, but her lawyer was there. "Where is she?" the judge asked. "In Wisconsin, Your Honor," her lawyer replied. "Why isn't she here?" "She's competing in an Ironman competition." "What's that?" the judge asked. Her lawyer explained the extreme endurance required for the competition. "And she considers this more important than today's hearing?" The judge shook his head. "I can't answer that, Your Honor," the lawyer said. "I think I can," the judge replied. Before I knew it, I was officially divorced. Laura received nothing but the money I had left her. My lawyer shook my hand and told me that in a few weeks I'd be officially single. I spent some time with my family, and during that time, we heard on the local news that Laura had been disqualified from the Ironman in Wisconsin. She had completed the swim portion, but got into an argument with a judge over an equipment issue. Apparently, during the swim-to-bike transition, Laura, who placed 297th out of 1,300, dropped her towel. Her coach, Jason Hendricks, handed it to her, and she was disqualified for receiving outside assistance, which violated the rules. This enraged Laura, and she physically attacked Hendricks, blaming him for the disqualification. She was arrested and held in Wisconsin, awaiting trial. Jason Hendricks was banned for life from all Ironman competitions, and his coaching license was revoked. To make matters worse, Laura's bike was found to have damaged gears, something else she blamed on Hendricks. When I heard the news, I laughed until I nearly cried. 2 years of training, a divorce, an affair, and rumors of a pregnancy termination had led to her being disqualified in the first stage of her big competition. All her preparation, and it ended in chaos. Her beloved bikes, now useless to her. Snowstorms pounded the roads as I drove back to Leadville from the Denver airport. Diana and I had stayed in touch while I was away, so she knew about the divorce and Laura's disqualification. When I finally pulled up to my house and grabbed my bag, Diana suddenly jumped on me. After a flurry of kisses, she practically dragged me to my front door, helping me open it. We both stumbled into the living room, and she started undressing me. At first I thought she was just helping me out of my winter clothes, but she kept going. Hey, hold on a second, let me catch my breath, I said, laughing. No chance, mister, she teased. You're divorced now, and I'm going to have you until I lose my breath. I stopped her, pulling her into a tight hug so she couldn't move. I'm looking forward to this part, but what does having me until you lose your breath even mean? She laughed. I don't know, it just came out. I guess it means I can screw your brains out now that you're single. Well, that makes it clear, I said, helping her finish undressing me. Then we started undressing her. We didn't stay in our clothes for long. Soon we were both without clothes in my bed. That first moment wasn't about affection or romance. It was pure desperation, the kind that comes from two people who hadn't had closeness in a long time and were eager to break their celibacy. The next day, we both barely made it to work. Diana stayed the night, and when we left for work, we were still getting dressed. We spent most of the day talking on the phone, figuring out how we could meet again later. She had a meeting she couldn't miss, or we would have had a mid-afternoon date at my apartment. Though we couldn't manage it during the day, we definitely made up for it in the evening. I gave her a key to my apartment, and when I arrived home, she was already there, fresh out of the shower. I've never showered faster in my life. I jumped into bed with her, and our lovemaking that night was different. We took our time, explored each other, and enjoyed every moment. I studied every inch of her body, learning how to make her smile and moan simultaneously. I also discovered how to make her scream and laugh at the same time. It felt like learning the art of love from scratch. In the 5th century BC, Chinese strategist Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War on Warfare Strategies. After a week with Diana, my understanding of love had transformed. I mentally began drafting a book called The Art of Love, entirely dedicated to her. The physical connection was incredible, but it was more than just act. I loved looking at her, touching her, tasting her, and being close to her. I could always sense when she was near. My parents used to tell me that our dog, Baron, could sense when I was coming home. He'd sit by the window, wagging his tail, then run from door to door trying to guess which one I'd enter. I felt the same way about Diana. When she was nearby, my heart would race and a smile would spread across my face. Closeness can be described, but the sensations can't be put into words. A year after our first night together, we got married. It was a beautiful, clear, warm mountain day, unlike the stormy weather from the previous year. Mountain weather took some getting used to, but that day everything was perfect. My family came to the wedding, and just before the ceremony, my father pulled me aside. "Are you curious about what happened to Laura?" he asked. "Not really, but I'm sure you'll tell me anyway," I replied. "Well, you know about Wisconsin, right? That she attacked him?" "Yeah, I heard. She was jailed for 6 months because of it. When she got out, she came back to town, but no one wanted anything to do with her, not even Hendricks. He's still at the gym, but just as a regular trainer now, not an Ironman coach. Laura went back to her old job since she's great with computers. She's given up on training except for the annual hot dog eating contest on the 4th of July. She's probably gained 25 pounds, he added with a laugh. The world had finally fallen into place. I was about to marry the love of my life, and all the chaos from before had settled down. Diana and I would occasionally see her ex-husband, David Webster, around town, but we never spoke to him. Nearly a year into our marriage, I had to stop by a hardware store. By then, a big chain store had opened, offering cheaper prices than the local shops, which had been forced to close. I needed new belts for my sander, so I went to the chain store. While choosing the belts, someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around and saw David Webster. "Hello, stranger," he said. "Hi," I replied. "How are you?" "Not bad," he answered, wearing a vest with the store's logo. "Do you work here now?" I asked. "Yeah, this is the only job in town. The pay's good and the benefits are great." "Well, I've got what I need, so I'll be going," I said, ready to leave. He touched my hand to stop me. "I want you to know you did me a favor," he said. "Is that so?" "Yeah, I don't have to pay alimony anymore," he laughed, finding it amusing. I just smiled politely and walked away, thinking to myself, yeah, but now I get the birthday presents. As life moved forward, Diana and I settled into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Our days together were filled with simple joys, weekend trips to the mountains, quiet dinners at home, and moments of shared laughter over things only the two of us could understand. The chaos of the past seemed like a distant memory, one that had lost its sharp edges and faded into something I could finally let go of. Every now and then I'd catch a glimpse of Laura around town. She'd pass by on the street, or I'd spot her in line at the grocery store, her once fierce determination now softened into something unrecognizable. Hendrix was a shadow of his former self, too. They had become part of the town's folklore, a cautionary tale of ambition gone too far, of priorities twisted beyond repair. People whispered about them sometimes, but no one really cared anymore. Their drama had burned out long ago. As for Diana and me, we had built something that couldn't be touched by the past. Our love wasn't about grand gestures or fireworks. It was about trust, about showing up for each other every day, in the small, quiet moments that made up a life. The kind of love that grows deeper with time, without needing to prove itself to anyone but us. I often thought about how lucky I was, how close I'd come to letting all of it slip away. There were moments, fleeting but real, when I almost let pride, fear, or doubt get in the way of what was right in front of me. But in the end, Diana and I chose each other, over and over again, in the ways that mattered most. Our life wasn't perfect. No life ever is. We had our share of arguments and misunderstandings, but we always found our way back. Because that's what love is, isn't it? It's not about the absence of problems. It's about facing them together, standing side by side, even when things get hard. Especially when things get hard. Now, as I sit here writing this, looking back on everything that's happened, I realize something important. It's not about how you start, or even how you end. It's about the middle. The messy, complicated, beautiful middle, where all the real living happens. And in that middle, I found everything I'd ever been looking for. Diana and I have been through enough to know that we can face whatever comes next. We don't have all the answers, but we've got each other. And in the end, that's more than enough. As for Laura, Hendrix, David, and all the others who crossed our paths, their stories are their own now, just as mine is mine. But as far as I'm concerned, this chapter of my life, this part where I've finally found peace, love, and the simple joy of waking up next to someone who makes every day better, is the only story that matters. And I can't wait to see what comes next. What